Hi, my name is Sue Johnson. I'm an associate member of the Canadian Society of Cinematographers, and today I'm here to talk to you about lights. In particular, how do you pick lights that are appropriate for your package among the variety of options that are out there today? What I'd like to do is give you a framework for making choices by asking yourself particular questions, talking a bit about production concerns as well, and then what we'll do is we'll also get into looking at lights and their particular qualities. So before even picking your kit whatsoever, the first thing you should be doing is going to the script, and you should also be meeting with the director and talking about the look, the atmosphere, and the tone of the film. Because essentially everything should always be pointing back to story with your lighting choices. So, for example, there is a shoot that I was working on. The story, this was a documentary, the story of the film first started out with someone who is a glitzy costume designer that largely specialized in the 60s and the 70s. And so we lit that one way. We were using a lot of tungsten sources, a little more directional, kind of playing up the theatrics of it all. But in terms of the story of this documentary, what then happens, he has to sell the shop. He sells it to someone much younger who represents a different style of costuming and also just a different generation. And so when we went back to shoot that interview, what we did is we used LED lights and gave it a bit of a crisper feel. Now, in terms of the story, we could do that. If we were just trying to location match, then maybe you would say, oh, let's stay with this particular look that has been established. But again, the story allows you to play around with the look and make decisions that reinforce the themes and the story itself. So in terms of the kind of productions that you're doing, you might be on a documentary, you might be on a fiction shoot with anamorphics, but I like to establish a framework for working on both these kind of projects and then figure out my lighting choices from there based on these following considerations. One of the first ones is the kind of locations you're going to be filming in. For instance, you get to a location, are you filming with a lot of windows in that location? Then you have to consider, is that location on a ground floor? Am I going to be having lights that are coming in? Or are we on a 22nd floor? And I can't put a light outside, so what I'm going to be doing is having to deal with the sun and then have a source that matches inside, or even faking from the inside, which can also be a little bit challenging. This will determine decisions like, am I going to get an HMI, for instance, which is typically a source that you would use, kind of pipe through windows to give a naturalistic sun look? Or are you going to be doing something, like LEDs at 5600K that are easy to get upstairs, that aren't too hot, that you can put into an internal location? When you're on location, this is also a really good time to figure out, are you going to light to 3200 or are you going to light to 56? Or somewhere in between if you have to match to the existing lights that are in the location, i.e. fluorescence. Let's say you're in X big box store or a school, whatever it may be. You can also do this during the script breakdown as well, but I find often when you're actually on the location, even though I break it down in the script, what I will often notice is something that determines that I might change that and say, oh, I can, block out this window and shoot at 3200, for instance, because maybe I like the look of 3200 more so than 56. These are, of course, your own determinations, but just a factor. Another great thing to know while picking lights is the general focal lengths that the film is going to play into. So for instance, if you're doing a shoot that is, let's say, on anamorphics, it's playing in wides, even the close-ups are kind of wide-ish, for instance. That's a situation where your light choices, you're going to want something with a bit more throw to it because literally the lights can't be in shot, of course, right? So when you're dealing with wides, you have to really consider your sources in terms of their output and their throw. That has, of course, a domino effect in terms of your power, which you should be always considering as well. So if you're interior on location, will you be running sources that you'll need a generator for? Or is this shoot all about being really nimble, like on a documentary? It needs to be even faster than fiction, even though fiction is also very fast now. And so what you'll be doing, again, is bringing in something that is, quick to set up and doesn't require many people. Also, other considerations to think about are the amount of crew that you have. Hopefully you always have a crew that is familiar with the sources that you're using, but in reality, depending on the type of production you're working on, sometimes you're just lucky to have people that are enthusiastic about being there and are happy to learn and, show up on time. But the downside of that is that you want to make sure as a head of department that your crew is safe. You are responsible for them. So if you know that you've got a crew that might not have a lot of experience using larger sources, let's say moving around bigger lights, let's say you've got a 5K on the shoot, for example, then you really need to consider that and work around either finding different solutions through more different kinds of lights than that, or trying to also push production to be able to allow you to hire more people. And this is one of the kind of background things to lighting and also assessing your kit, is assessing how easy it is to actually move it around and use it. Ultimately, what you're trying to do when you're picking a kit, you want to create the most time on the floor for the director. And the way that you do this as the director of photography is to ensure that your lighting choices are efficient and are well prepped in advance so that you're not making decisions on the fly. So when you're walking into a location, you already know when you're walking into a location on the day, you already know the kelvins that you're lighting it for. Maybe it's even been pre-lit, which is ideal. In terms of considerations for picking a kit beyond just the quality of the light itself, I always like to look to first the script, because the script will, of course, inform the look. So, for instance, in the case of a candlelight scene, that has ramifications for the types of lights that you're going to pick. You might even decide to use tungsten sources to start out and then have some LEDs that have candlelight functions in them to be able to complement those on-camera practical lights. So the script is going to drive a lot of your decisions in terms of the lights that you need, but also the locations drive a lot of your decisions. When you understand the locations, you can understand the specific parameters involved in terms of, is this light going to work in this location? You don't want to be saddled with too many lights or lights that just can't be physically moved around the location. So for instance, if you are lighting a ground floor, it's 5600K, let's say. You want to have some light coming in from outside and then some lights inside to light your actors. That's no problem because you can pretty much put any light outside on the ground floor. So that opens you up to heavier lights, let's say like getting into a 5K HMI, anything like that. However, if the parameters of your location are 22nd floor, condo, you have to make a totally different set of decisions about what you can do. So the location often determines what is going to happen with your lighting package. The other thing you can do too is if you have the option, of course you want to have all the options. So you'd have an HMI on the truck and then you would have your LEDs in the situation that you could just beam up to the 22nd floor, nice and easy. But I'm also talking to all of you who don't necessarily have the option to be able to have a truck loaded with gear all the time and the whole crew. So these are the situations where it can be really effective to just go through location by location. Visiting the locations is absolutely essential as well so that you can see what is happening in the location and also just make a plan. Often being in the space itself, you can come up with plans that are actually quite simple versus the ones when you're just looking at the page. Your other considerations too, of course, are figuring out which kelvins you're going to light to. Indoor 3200 or outdoor 5600. Again, this is something that you can do with the script, but once you get to a location, you can also figure out that you might want to do that a different way, and the location always helps you dictate those decisions. And of course, safety is a concern, and your crew. You want to make sure that when you're picking lights, you make decisions around the realistic experience of the people that are surrounding you. So for instance, I was working on a documentary project where we had to decide between sky panels or light mats. And the issue was that it was a situation where I didn't have a lot of help. I had one person who was doing swing with me, who was very enthusiastic, but was not from a lighting background. We're also in a lot of outdoor locations for this as well. What would be great is that the sky panel has a lot of throw to it and is easy to match. If the sun's on the background, the sky panel can certainly handle that kind of output for the master interview. But at the same time, we were running around and it was just a little bit too much for this particular crew. So in that case, I decided to go with something that was great in color rendition, but was maybe a little bit easier for us to handle in terms of our crewing requirements. The other thing that you always want to consider too is talking to production about this. Often a big part of picking lights is fighting for them. And the lights that we're talking about today, to be honest, they are a little more on the expensive end of the rental spectrum. Not every production is going to want you to have everything that you want. But you always have to talk to production in terms of the time that it's going to take you to set up and the amount it's going to save, and also the efficiency and the quality. It can be really worth it to spend a little bit of extra money on X source if what it's going to give you is a lot more versatility. It replaces 2 lights instead of 1, and it means that you have a crew that is actually able to work with it. So always focus on what is helpful and going back to the story, and then that's an easy sell for production. So now that we've established a framework for guiding some of your decisions around picking a package, let's talk about the lights themselves. So in terms of these sources, how do you assess these lights for their appropriateness for your production? It's not just whether the source is hard or soft. What you're really looking at are attributes of the light in terms of wrap, throw, and spread. When I'm talking about wrap, what I really mean is how the light responds to a subject, how it falls on them. This also has a lot to do with how the shadows play on a subject as well. It's literally when it lights on a subject, specifically on their face, how does it wrap it? And you'll find that some lights, for instance, tungsten, still I find to be an unbeatable source with wrap. Everyone just looks amazing with tungsten sources. This again is a bit of an opinion. Of course, you can make people look amazing with any source, but tungsten does have a little bit of a magic factor in my personal opinion. But again, it's a personal opinion based on seeing these lights in action and deciding what I also like as part of my own look being a DOP. Other things you want to consider are spread, literally, how wide is the light. If it's a soft source, the spread will be wider, which means that you need a lot more lighting modifiers to control it. Whereas if you're working with a hard source, like a Fresnel, let's say, for example, you can focus in that beam, and that means that it won't be splashing all over the back wall, for instance, without a certain kind of modifier. And the throw, we're going to talk about as well, is just how far that light goes. Again, some lights are great close up, but you get 10 feet away from them and the drop off is too much to make it appropriate for using in a wide shot. In other cases, you'll have a light that really excels for wides because it's got a wonderful focus to it. It might even be a soft source, but there's just something about the throw of it where it has a little more power behind it and you can really get that actor well lit and maybe even 15 feet from it. So overall, what you should be doing is challenging yourself to light quickly and efficiently no matter what kind of sources you pick. Always remember, pick a key that gives you a little more power than you need to cover yourself. And when you're coming up with a list of lights, come up with your short list and make sure that you fight for it because ultimately these decisions are informed by a lot of research from you and they're going to help you to be efficient and productive on set. What you want to do is you want to come up with your short list and you want to fight for it with the rationale of the efficiency that it's going to give you, as well as going back to the script. If it makes you faster on set, frees up time for the director to have time with the subjects, while also telling the story in a beautiful, effective manner, then usually it's an easy sell to production. So focus on those aspects and get the lighting kit that helps you out the most.